The mining station Kepler 442b hung in the void like a metallic spider, its 8 arms stretching into the asteroid field that surrounded the distant star. Commander Sarah Chen watched through the observation deck as another cargo hauler disappeared into hyperspace, taking with it the last of her skeleton crew. In 3 days, she would be completely alone. The evacuation order had come from Earth Central Command 6 months ago. The Zephyrian Empire had claimed the system, and humanity was pulling back to avoid another devastating war. Every human settlement, mining operation, and research station was being abandoned. Every single one except Kepler 442b, because Sarah had volunteered to stay behind and maintain the automated systems until the very last moment. What Command didn't know was that Sarah had her own reasons for wanting to remain in this forgotten corner of space. 3 years ago, during a routine survey mission, Sarah had discovered something extraordinary in the abandoned Zephyrian research facility on the third moon. Not technology or weapons, but a person. An alien woman, trapped in some kind of stasis chamber, forgotten when the Zephyrians had hastily evacuated the facility decades earlier. The woman was unlike any Zephyrian Sarah had ever seen in the intelligence briefings. Where most Zephyrians were tall and angular with silver skin and cold black eyes, this woman was smaller, more delicate. Her skin held a warm golden hue, and when she had first awakened, her eyes had been a startling shade of violet that seemed to hold depths of emotion that Sarah had never seen in any alien species. Her name was Lyrelai, and she claimed to be a genetic outcast from Zephyrian society. Born with emotions and physical traits that her people considered aberrant, she had been exiled to the research facility where scientists had studied her like a laboratory specimen. When the facility was abandoned, she had been left behind in stasis, presumed dead. Sarah had brought Lyrelai to the mining station in secret, telling her crew that she was conducting classified research. Over the months that followed, as Sarah helped Lyrelai recover and adapt to life outside stasis, something unexpected had happened. They had become friends. More than friends, if Sarah was being honest with herself. Now, as the last transport disappeared into the star-speckled darkness, Sarah made her way to the station's hydroponics bay where Lyrelai spent most of her time. The alien woman had developed a fascination with earth plants, tending to them with a gentleness that reminded Sarah why she had risked everything to save her. Lyrelai looked up from a tomato plant as Sarah entered, her violet eyes brightening with what Sarah had learned to recognize as joy. In the 3 years since her rescue, Lyrelai had learned to speak fluent English, though her accent gave her words a musical quality that Sarah found enchanting. "The last ship has gone," Sarah said, settling onto a bench beside the growing beds. Lyrelai nodded, her expression growing serious. "You could have left with them. You still could take one of the shuttles and reach the hyperspace beacon before your people close the corridor." "I know," Sarah replied, "but I made a promise. I said I would stay until the Zephyrian fleet arrives to claim the station. That was not your only reason." Lyrelai's voice was soft, but there was something in her tone that made Sarah look up sharply. For a moment, they stared at each other across the humid air of the hydroponics bay. Sarah felt her heart racing as she realized that Lyrelai had always known perhaps why Sarah had really chosen to stay behind. "Lyrelai," Sarah began, but the alien woman held up a delicate hand to stop her. "In my culture, before I was exiled, there were certain rituals," Lyrelai said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ways for individuals to declare their intentions to form a bonding partnership. Your people call it marriage, I believe." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Lyrelai, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I have spent 3 years learning about human customs and emotions. I have watched how you care for me, how you risk yourself to protect me, how you look at me when you think I am not aware." Lyrelai stood and moved closer, her golden skin seeming to glow in the artificial sunlight of the growing lamps. "I am saying that I wish to bond with you, Sarah Chen, to become your partner in the way of your people." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had dreamed of this moment, fantasized about it during the long, lonely nights when she lay awake thinking about the impossible situation they were in, but she had never dared to hope that Lyrelai might feel the same way. "The Zephyrian fleet will be here in less than 72 hours, Sarah said, her voice hoarse with emotion. "They'll take the station, and they'll take you. Even if you're in exile, you're still their citizen. They won't let you stay with me." "Perhaps," Lyrelai agreed, "but perhaps not. There are things about my exile that I have not told you, things about why I was truly cast out from my people. She reached out and took Sarah's hand, her skin warm and soft against Sarah's calloused fingers. I was not only exiled for my physical differences or my emotional capacity. I was exiled because I refused to participate in their breeding programs, because I declared that I would only bond with someone of my own choosing, regardless of species or genetic compatibility. Sarah felt her world tilt on its axis. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I am saying that I chose you long before today, Sarah Chen. I am saying that if you will have me, I wish to be your wife in whatever way your laws and customs allow. And I am saying that I believe there may be a way for us to remain together, even when my people come to reclaim this place. Before Sarah could respond, the station's communication system crackled to life. A voice spoke in the harsh, clicking language of the Zephyrians, followed by the computer's translation into English. Attention, human facility. This is Battle Cruiser Nexus Prime of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. We will arrive at your location in 68 hours to assume control of this system. Prepare for immediate evacuation and handover of all facilities and equipment. Sarah and Lyrelay looked at each other, both understanding that their time was running out faster than expected. Whatever plan Lyrelay had in mind, they would need to act quickly. Tell me everything, Sarah said, squeezing Lyrelay's hand. Tell me what you know about your people's laws, about your exile, about everything that might help us stay together. Lyrelay smiled, and for the first time since Sarah had known her, it was a smile without any trace of sadness. I will tell you everything, my beloved human. But first, will you answer my question? Will you bond with me? Will you become my husband in the way of your people? Sarah pulled Lyrelay into her arms, feeling the alien woman's warmth against her chest. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you, Lyrelay. Whatever happens when your people arrive, I want to face it as your wife. Outside the station, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that in a small hydroponics bay, two beings from different worlds had just changed the course of their destinies forever. The ceremony took place in the observation deck at dawn, if dawn could be called the moment when Kepler 442's pale orange light crested the largest asteroid in the field. Sarah had never imagined she would be married in the depths of space, with no witnesses except the stars and the woman she loved. Lyrelay had spent the night preparing, using the station's fabrication unit to create something that resembled a wedding dress from human designs she had studied in the database. The result was breathtaking, a flowing gown that seemed to capture and reflect the starlight, made from a material that shifted between silver and gold depending on the angle of view. Sarah wore her dress uniform, the same one she had planned to be buried in if things went wrong during the evacuation. Now it served a much happier purpose. They had no officiant, so they wrote their own vows using a combination of human wedding traditions and what Lyrelay remembered of Zephyrian bonding rituals. Sarah spoke first, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were doing. Lyrelay, I promise to love you across the space between worlds, to stand with you against any force that would separate us, and to choose you every day for as long as we both exist in this universe. Lyrelay's response was partly in English and partly in her native tongue, the musical syllables of Zephyrian creating a harmony that seemed to resonate through the station's hull. Sarah Chen, I bind my life to yours in defiance of laws both human and Zephyrian. I choose love over duty, heart over biology, and hope over fear. In your language and mine, I pledge my existence to our shared future. They exchanged rings made from rare metals found in the asteroid field, and when they kissed, Sarah felt as though the universe itself had shifted to accommodate their love, but their happiness was short-lived. Even as they held each other in the starlight, Lyrelay began to explain the desperate plan that might allow them to stay together. My exile was not just punishment, she said as they sat together in the captain's quarters that Sarah had prepared for their wedding night. It was also a legal declaration. In Zephyrian law, an exile cannot be reclaimed by the Empire unless they commit a crime against Imperial citizens or property. Sarah frowned. But surely they'll just ignore their own laws if they want you back. Not if there are witnesses, Lyrelay replied. The Zephyrian military follows strict protocols when it comes to legal matters. If my exile status can be verified by an independent source, they cannot force me to return. What kind of independent source? Lyrelay's smile was both hopeful and terrifying. A human diplomatic vessel. If representatives of the human government were to witness and record my legal status, the Zephyrians would be bound by interspecies treaty to respect the ruling. Sarah's heart sank. Lyrelei, the nearest human diplomatic ship, is 3 sectors away. Even if I could contact them, they couldn't get here before the Zephyrian fleet arrives. No, Lyrelei agreed. But there is another way. According to the files in your station's database, you hold the rank of commander in the Human Colonial Defense Force. In situations where normal diplomatic channels are unavailable, military commanders are authorized to act as temporary diplomatic representatives. The implications of what Lyrelei was suggesting hit Sarah like a meteor. You want me to formally recognize your exile status in an official capacity, to create a legal document that the Zephyrians would have to honor. More than that, Lyrelei said, taking Sarah's hands, I want you to grant me political asylum. As a persecuted individual seeking protection from an oppressive government, I have the right under both human and Zephyrian law to request sanctuary, and as my legally recognized spouse, you would have the authority to sponsor my asylum claim. Sarah stood and began pacing the small room, her mind racing through the implications. Even if that worked, which is a huge if, we'd still be trapped here. The Zephyrians aren't just going to let us leave. Actually, they might, Lyrelei said quietly. There's something else I haven't told you about my exile. Something about why the Zephyrian Empire really wants this system. Sarah stopped pacing and stared at her new wife. What do you mean? Lyrelei stood and walked to the porthole, gazing out at the asteroid field. This system doesn't just contain rare minerals, Sarah. Hidden in one of these asteroids is a Zephyrian research facility that was abandoned in such haste that they left behind something incredibly valuable. Something that my people have been searching for across half the galaxy. What kind of something? A prototype terraforming device. Technology that could transform dead worlds into garden planets in a matter of years instead of centuries. Lyrelei turned back to Sarah, her violet eyes intense. I know where it is because I helped design it. That was my function at the research facility before my exile. I was a terraforming engineer. Sarah felt her legs give out and she sank back onto the bed. You're telling me that you're not just any exile. You're a scientist who worked on one of the most valuable pieces of technology in known space. Yes. And if the Zephyrians reclaim me, they'll have access to not just the device, but to my knowledge of how to build more. Lyrelei sat beside Sarah, her expression grave. That technology in the wrong hands could shift the balance of power in this entire sector of the galaxy. But in the right hands, Sarah said slowly, understanding beginning to dawn, it could help humanity colonize worlds faster than ever before. It could be the key to our species' expansion into deep space. Exactly. Which is why, as a human military commander, you would be authorized to take possession of the device to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. And you would be equally authorized to extract any individuals with knowledge of the technology, including political refugees who request asylum. Sarah looked at her wife with new admiration and a growing sense of hope. You're saying we don't just run from the Zephyrian fleet. We negotiate with them from a position of strength. I'm saying we give them a choice, Lyrelei replied. They can respect my exile status and asylum claim, allowing us to leave with the terraforming device, or they can try to take me by force and risk starting an interstellar incident that their empire is not prepared for. That's an enormous gamble, Sarah said. What if they call our bluff? What if they decide the technology is worth risking a war with humanity? Lyrelei leaned forward and kissed Sarah softly. Then we'll face whatever comes together. But I don't think they'll risk it. The Zephyrian Empire is powerful, but they're also cautious. They've spent decades avoiding direct conflict with humanity, because they know your species has a reputation for being unpredictable in warfare. Sarah couldn't help but smile at that. Humanity's reputation for being willing to fight against impossible odds had become legendary among the alien species they'd encountered. Sometimes that reputation was more valuable than actual weapons. All right, Sarah said, standing and pulling Lyrelei to her feet. Let's do this. But first we need to find that terraforming device, and we need to prepare a legal brief that would make a diplomatic lawyer proud. And we need to send a message to your Colonial Defense Force, Lyrelei added. If we're going to make this work, we need them to know what's happening here. We need backup, even if it's just documentation of our actions. Sarah nodded, feeling the familiar weight of command settling on her shoulders. But for the first time in years, she wasn't carrying that weight alone. She had a partner now, someone who understood the stakes and was willing to risk everything for their future together. "Mrs. Chen," Sarah said, testing out the sound of Lyralay's new name. "Shall we go save the galaxy?" Lyralay's laughter filled the small cabin like music. "Lead the way, Commander. Let's show the universe what happens when humans and Zephyrians work together, instead of against each other." Outside their porthole, the asteroid field glittered with possibility, hiding secrets that could change the fate of civilizations. And in less than 60 hours, they would learn whether love truly could conquer the vast distances between stars. Finding the terraforming device proved easier than Sarah had expected, but infinitely more dangerous than Lyra Lee had warned her. The hidden facility was buried deep inside Asteroid 7 Alpha, accessible only through a maintenance tunnel that required them to navigate in pressure suits. Through a maze of unstable rock formations, Lyra guided them with the confidence of someone who had made this journey many times before. But Sarah could see the tension in her wife's movements as they approached the facility's entrance. This place held painful memories for the Zephyrian woman, and returning here couldn't be easy. The facility itself was a marvel of alien engineering, carved directly into the solid rock of the asteroid's core. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across walls covered in symbols that Sarah couldn't read, but somehow found beautiful in their geometric complexity. Lyra moved through the corridors like she was coming home, her fingers trailing along surfaces as she led Sarah deeper into the heart of the installation. "My laboratory was here," Lyra said as they passed a sealed doorway. "I spent 3 years of my life in that room, working on equations that I thought would help my people create new worlds for overcrowded populations. I never imagined they would use my work as a weapon." Sarah squeezed Lyra's gloved hand through their environmental suits. "How could terraforming technology be used as a weapon? Imagine a device that could transform a planet's atmosphere in months instead of decades," Lyra explained as they continued down the corridor. "Now imagine that same device programmed to create an atmosphere that's toxic to the current inhabitants. Instant genocide with no need for military invasion." The thought made Sarah's blood run cold. She had assumed they were dealing with purely beneficial technology, something that would help humanity expand peacefully into the galaxy. The reality was far more complex and terrifying. They found the terraforming device in a vault 3 levels down from the main facility. It was smaller than Sarah had expected, roughly the size of a briefcase made from a metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When Lyra powered it on for demonstration, holographic displays filled the air around them with data that made Sarah's head spin. This prototype can analyze a planet's core composition, atmospheric density, and gravitational field, then generate a precise formula for atmospheric conversion, Lyra explained, her voice filled with pride despite everything that had happened. "The actual terraforming is accomplished through the release of engineered microorganisms that can survive in space and reproduce rapidly once they reach a suitable environment." Sarah studied the readouts, trying to understand the implications. "How many planets could you terraform with this thing?" "The device itself is reusable indefinitely," Lyra said. "But each terraforming operation requires a specific combination of organisms that must be cultured in advance. The real limitation is time and resources, not the technology itself. And you know how to operate it, how to create the organisms it needs." Lyra nodded. "I designed the biological components. The knowledge is stored both in the device's memory banks and in my own mind. That's why the Zephyrian Empire wants me back so badly. Without me, the device is just an extremely complex piece of jewelry." Sarah carefully lifted the device from its housing, amazed by how light it was for something so revolutionary. "How do we prove to the Zephyrians that we actually have this? They might think we're bluffing. We don't just tell them we have it," Lyra said with a smile that was both beautiful and slightly terrifying. "We show them what it can do." An hour later, they were back in the mining station's command center, with the terraforming device connected to the station's main computer array. Lyra's fingers danced across the holographic interfaces as she programmed a demonstration that Sarah hoped wouldn't get them both killed. "I'm targeting the smallest asteroid in the field," Lyra explained as she worked. "Asteroid 12 Gamma. It's mostly iron and nickel with no atmosphere and no possibility of supporting life. We're going to give it a breathable atmosphere in about 6 hours." 6 hours? Sarah stared at the displays showing Asteroid 12 Gamma, a chunk of rock barely a kilometer across. You can create an atmosphere around something that small in 6 hours? It won't be a permanent atmosphere, Lyra Lee clarified. Without sufficient gravity, most of it will dissipate within a few days. But for a short demonstration, it will be perfect. The Zephyrians will be able to detect the atmospheric changes from their ships, and they'll know immediately that we have their missing technology. Sarah watched as Lyra Lee initiated the terraforming sequence. The device hummed softly as it analyzed the target asteroid and calculated the necessary biological formulas. Then, with barely a vibration, it launched thousands of microscopic pods toward 12 Gamma, each one containing engineered organisms designed to transform dead rock into living atmosphere. Now we wait, Lyra Lee said, settling back in her chair, and we prepare for the most important negotiation of our lives. The preparation involved drafting legal documents that Sarah hoped would hold up under the scrutiny of both human and Zephyrian law. Using the station's extensive legal database, she created a formal asylum petition on Lyra Lee's behalf, complete with documentation of her exile status and evidence of persecution by Zephyrian authorities. She also prepared a military requisition order for the terraforming device, claiming it under the Human Colonial Defense Forces authority to secure alien technology that posed a potential threat to human colonies. Lyra Lee helped by providing detailed records of her work and exile, including holographic testimony that painted a devastating picture of Zephyrian treatment of genetic deviants. By the time they finished, they had assembled a legal brief that could have been submitted to the Galactic Arbitration Council if such a body existed. 18 hours before the Zephyrian fleet's arrival, Sarah sent an encrypted message to Colonial Defense Force headquarters, outlining their situation and requesting official support for their asylum claim. She didn't expect a response before the Zephyrians arrived, but the transmission itself would serve as evidence that human authorities were aware of the situation. 12 hours later, as they monitored the terraforming progress on asteroid 12 Gamma, Sarah received a response that changed everything. Message received and understood. Commander Chen, came the voice of Admiral Rebecca Torres, Sarah's former commanding officer. Colonial Defense Force officially recognizes your authority to grant asylum in this situation. We are dispatching the cruiser Endeavour to your location, but it won't arrive for another 72 hours. You are authorized to take whatever actions necessary to protect yourself, your asylum seeker, and any alien technology of strategic importance. Godspeed, Commander. Sarah felt a surge of relief and pride. Humanity might be outgunned and outnumbered in this part of the galaxy, but they didn't abandon their own. Even if the Endeavour arrived too late to help with the immediate crisis, knowing that backup was coming gave Sarah the confidence she needed for the confrontation ahead. 6 hours before the Zephyrian fleet's scheduled arrival, the terraforming demonstration reached its conclusion. Asteroid 12 Gamma, which had been a lifeless chunk of rock that morning, now glowed with a thin but detectable atmosphere. Sensors showed oxygen, nitrogen, and trace gases in proportions that would support human life. If only temporarily. It's beautiful, Sarah whispered, watching the readouts that proved Lyra Lee's incredible achievement. It's a shadow of what this technology could accomplish on a real planet. Lyra Lee replied. Imagine dead worlds like Mars transformed into gardens in a matter of months. Imagine humanity spreading across the galaxy, no longer limited by the search for naturally habitable planets. Sarah turned to face her wife, seeing the hope and determination in Lyra Lee's violet eyes. Is that what you want? To help humanity explore the stars? I want to help anyone who will use this technology for creation rather than destruction, Lyra Lee said. My people have forgotten that science should serve life, not death. Perhaps humans will remember what the Zephyrians have lost. Before Sarah could respond, the station's long-range sensors detected the approaching Zephyrian fleet. 6 massive warships led by the battlecruiser that had contacted them earlier. Even at this distance, Sarah could see that they were heavily armed and ready for trouble. Commander Chen, came a transmission in accented but fluent English. This is Fleet Admiral Korath of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. Prepare to receive a boarding party for immediate inspection and transfer of all Imperial property and citizens. Sarah looked at Lyra Lee, who nodded encouragingly. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the test of whether love and determination could stand against the might of an empire. Sarah opened a return channel, her voice steady and professional. "Admiral Korath, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Before any boarding operations commence, I have official matters of interspecies law to discuss with you. I believe you'll find our conversation quite illuminating." The response was a long silence, followed by what Sarah could only assume was cursing in the Zephyrian language. The boarding party that arrived at Kepler 442b was unlike anything Sarah had expected. Instead of battle-armored soldiers, Admiral Korath came aboard with a small delegation that included what appeared to be a legal advisor, a scientist, and someone whose ornate robes suggested high political rank. Sarah met them in the station's main docking bay, wearing her dress uniform and carrying a datapad containing all the legal documents she and Lirelei had prepared. Lirelei stood beside her, no longer hiding behind environmental suits or shadows. She wore a simple human-style dress, but her golden skin and violet eyes made her impossible to mistake for anything other than what she was: a Zephyrian exile who had chosen love over loyalty to her people. Admiral Korath was a typical Zephyrian military officer. Tall, silver-skinned, with the cold black eyes that Sarah had seen in countless intelligence briefings. But when his gaze fell on Lirelei, something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or surprise at seeing her alive after so many years. "Exile Lirelei 7749, he said in English, his accent making the words sound formal and distant. "You were declared dead when research facility Nexus Prime was abandoned. I was declared many things by our people." "Admiral," Lirelei replied, her voice steady despite the obvious tension in her posture. "Dead was merely the most convenient for those who wanted to forget their crimes against me." The Zephyrian in the ornate robe stepped forward, and when he spoke, his English was flawless. "I am Counselor Vex Prime, representative of the Zephyrian Imperial Council. The status of this exile is a matter of internal Imperial law, and not subject to human interference." Sarah had been waiting for this moment. She stepped forward, activating her datapad to display the first of their carefully prepared documents. "Counselor Vex Prime, with respect, you are incorrect. Under the Galactic Accords of 2387, specifically Article 12 regarding the treatment of political refugees, any individual claiming persecution by their government of origin has the right to seek asylum from a neutral party. As the ranking Human Colonial Defense Force officer in this system, I am authorized to grant such asylum. Furthermore," Sarah continued, warming to her argument, "Lirelei 7749 has formally requested asylum based on documented persecution for genetic differences and scientific descent. According to both human and Zephyrian law, as recorded in the Treaty of Rigel 7, such claims must be evaluated by neutral arbiters before any extradition can be considered." Counselor Vex Prime's expression darkened, but Admiral Korath held up a hand to prevent him from responding. "Commander Chen, while your legal arguments are creative, they ignore the reality of our respective military positions. You are alone on this station with no support, facing a fleet that could reduce this facility to debris in minutes." "Actually, Admiral, I'm not alone," Sarah replied with a smile. "And as for my support, I think you'll find that the Human Colonial Defense Force takes a very dim view of military threats against diplomatic missions. I've been in regular contact with my superiors throughout this situation." To emphasize her point, Sarah activated the main display screen in the docking bay, showing the recorded message from Admiral Torres that officially recognized her authority to grant asylum. She also displayed the transmission log showing her communications with Human Colonial Defense Force headquarters, making it clear that this situation was being monitored at the highest levels. "But more importantly," Sarah continued, "I think you'll want to reconsider your approach once you understand exactly what Lirelei has accomplished during her time here." She activated another display, showing the real-time atmospheric readings from asteroid 12 Gamma. The Zephyrian delegation stared at the data in obvious shock, their careful diplomatic composure cracking as they realized the implications. "Impossible," whispered the Zephyrian scientist, a female with intricate tattoos covering her silver skin. "The prototype was destroyed when Nexus Prime was evacuated." "Clearly it wasn't," Lirelei said, speaking directly to her fellow scientist for the first time. "And clearly I wasn't either, despite what your people told the galaxy." Admiral Korath turned to study Lirelei with new intensity. "You are claiming that you, an exile with no resources or laboratory facilities, successfully activated a prototype terraforming device and used it to transform a dead asteroid? I'm not claiming anything, Lyra Lee replied. The atmospheric readings speak for themselves, as do the biological samples we've collected from the asteroid's new ecosystem. Sarah activated a third display, showing microscopic images of the engineered organisms that Lyra Lee had created for the terraforming process. The Zephyrian scientist gasped audibly as she recognized designs that had supposedly been lost forever. These organisms, the scientist said, her voice filled with awe. They're based on the theoretical frameworks that were developed at Nexus Prime. But the genetic sequences are completely new, more elegant, more efficient. Yes, Lyra Lee said simply. I had 3 years to improve on my original work. 3 years to correct the flaws that made the prototype unstable. What you're seeing is not just a recreation of old technology, but a fundamental advancement that makes terraforming safer, faster, and more precise. Counselor Vex Prime stepped forward, his political instincts clearly recognizing the value of what they were discussing. If this technology exists, it belongs to the Zephyrian Empire. Lyra Lee 7749 was an Imperial citizen when she developed it, making any of her work Imperial property. Was she? Sarah asked, pulling up yet another document. Because according to the official exile decree that I've obtained from your own legal databases, Lyra Lee 7749 was stripped of her Imperial citizenship and declared severed from all obligations and protections of Zephyrian law on the date of her exile. That would seem to make her a free agent, capable of choosing her own loyalties. Moreover, Sarah continued, even if her original research belonged to the Empire, the improvements she's made during her 3 years of asylum clearly belong to her, and as her legally recognized spouse, I am authorized to act on her behalf in matters of intellectual property and scientific collaboration. Admiral Korath's eyes widened slightly at the word spouse, and he exchanged glances with the other members of his delegation. This was clearly a complication they hadn't anticipated. You married a Zephyrian exile? Counselor Vex Prime asked, his voice betraying the first hint of uncertainty Sarah had heard from him. I married the woman I love, Sarah replied firmly. The fact that she happens to be Zephyrian is irrelevant under both human and galactic law. Our marriage was conducted according to proper protocols and has been officially registered with Human Colonial Defense Force authorities. Lyra Lee stepped closer to Sarah, taking her hand in a gesture that was both intimate and defiant. I chose to bond with Sarah Chen because she saw me as a person, not a genetic aberration or a piece of Imperial property. My loyalty is to her now and through her to humanity. And my loyalty is to my wife, Sarah added, which means that I will not allow her to be taken by force regardless of the consequences. The terraforming technology stays with her, under the protection of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Admiral Korath was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful rather than threatening. Commander Chen, you present us with a complex situation. The Zephyrian Empire cannot simply ignore the theft of valuable technology, even by an exile. But neither can we afford to start a war with humanity over one individual, however valuable her knowledge might be. Then perhaps, Sarah suggested, we should discuss a solution that serves everyone's interests. She activated one final display, showing a proposal that she and Lyra Lee had spent hours crafting. The Human Colonial Defense Force is prepared to offer the Zephyrian Empire a joint research partnership. Lyra Lee would work with both human and Zephyrian scientists to develop terraforming applications that benefit both species. The technology would be shared equally, with strict agreements preventing its use for military purposes. In exchange, Sarah continued, the Zephyrian Empire would formally recognize Lyra Lee's asylum status and her marriage to me. She would be free to live and work wherever she chooses, but her research would be conducted in collaboration with both governments. Counselor Vex Prime studied the proposal, his expression unreadable. And if the Empire refuses this arrangement? Then Lyra Lee and her technology will remain under human protection, Sarah said simply. And the Zephyrian Empire will have to explain to its people why they chose conflict over cooperation when offered the chance to benefit from the greatest terraforming breakthrough in galactic history. Admiral Korath looked at his companions, then back at Sarah and Lyra Lee. This proposal would require approval from the Imperial Council. Such decisions are not made by military commanders in the field. Of course, Sarah agreed. which is why I'm prepared to allow Counselor Vex Prime to return to your fleet and contact the Council for instructions. Lyrelei and I will remain here, under the protection of the mining station's defensive systems until we receive a formal response. The wait stretched for 18 agonizing hours. Sarah and Lyrelei remained on the mining station, while the Zephyrian fleet held position at the edge of the asteroid field, neither advancing nor retreating. The tension was so thick that Sarah found herself checking the defensive systems every few minutes, even though she knew the station's modest weapons would be useless against 6 warships. Lyrelei spent the time refining her terraforming calculations, working with an intensity that Sarah recognized as nervous energy channeled into productive work. The Zephyrian woman had connected the prototype device to the station's main computer and was running simulations that painted breathtaking pictures of transformed worlds. "Look at this," Lyrelei said, calling Sarah over to examine a holographic projection of a red, barren planet. "This is Kepler 438b, a world that human surveys classified as marginally habitable. With targeted atmospheric seeding, we could have it producing oxygen and supporting plant life within 6 months." Sarah studied the simulation, amazed by the precision of Lyrelei's work. Every variable was accounted for: solar radiation, atmospheric pressure, soil composition, even the gravitational effects of the planet's 3 moons. "How many worlds like this are there in human space?" "Hundreds," Lyrelei replied. "Perhaps thousands. Your species has been limited to naturally habitable planets because terraforming technology has been either too slow or too dangerous. But with these improvements, you could expand your civilization across the galaxy in decades instead of centuries." "We could," Sarah corrected gently. "This is our future we're talking about, remember? Human and Zephyrian working together." Lyrelei's smile was radiant. "Yes, our future. I keep forgetting that I'm not alone in this anymore." Before Sarah could respond, the station's communication system activated with an incoming transmission from the Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Korath's image appeared on the main screen, but his expression was unreadable. "Commander Chen, exile Lyrelei," he began formally. "I have received instructions from the Imperial Council regarding your proposal." Sarah felt her heart stop. Everything they had worked for, everything they had risked, came down to the next few words from this alien military officer. "The Imperial Council has voted to accept your partnership proposal," Admiral Korath continued, "with certain modifications and conditions." Sarah and Lyrelei exchanged glances, relief and apprehension warring in their expressions. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. "First," Admiral Korath said, "the exile status of Lyrelei 7749 will be formally reviewed by Imperial legal authorities. If the review determines that her exile was unjustified or improperly conducted, she will be offered full restoration of Imperial citizenship, with the understanding that she may decline if she chooses." Lyrelei's hand found Sarah's, gripping it tightly. The possibility of having her exile officially overturned was something she had never dared to hope for. "Second," the Admiral continued, "the joint research partnership will be conducted under the oversight of both the Zephyrian Imperial Science Council and the Human Colonial Development Authority. All terraforming technology and applications will be shared equally between our species, with strict prohibitions against military applications." Sarah nodded. That was exactly what they had proposed, and she was surprised the Empire had accepted it so readily. "Third, and most importantly," Admiral Korath's tone became more serious, "Lyrelei 7749 will be granted full diplomatic immunity as a joint human Zephyrian research coordinator. Her marriage to Commander Chen will be officially recognized by the Empire, and she will be free to live and work in either human or Zephyrian space as she chooses." The magnitude of what they had accomplished hit Sarah like a physical blow. Not only had they secured Lyrelei's freedom, but they had also established her as an official diplomatic representative. She would be untouchable under both human and Zephyrian law. "However," Admiral Korath added, and Sarah felt her moment of triumph temper with caution, "the Imperial Council requires certain guarantees regarding the security and control of the terraforming technology." "What kind of guarantees?" Sarah asked. "The prototype device will be transferred to a joint research facility that will be established at a location acceptable to both governments," the Admiral explained. "Lyrelei 7749 will lead the research team, but the facility will be staffed by scientists from both species and protected by joint security forces." Sarah frowned. You're asking us to give up control of the technology. We're asking you to share control, Admiral Korath corrected. The alternative is that the Empire withdraws from the partnership and pursues the technology through other means. I'm sure you understand what that would entail. Lyra Lee stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Admiral, I need to speak with my husband privately before we can agree to these terms. May we have 1 hour to discuss our response? Of course, Admiral Korath replied. But understand that this offer will not remain open indefinitely. The Imperial Council has other options if diplomacy fails. After the transmission ended, Sarah and Lyra Lee retreated to the station's command center to discuss their options. Sarah felt frustrated by the Empire's demand for shared control, but Lyra Lee seemed more optimistic. Don't you see what they've really offered us? Lyra Lee asked, pulling up star charts on the main display. They're not just accepting our proposal. They're offering to make me the most powerful scientist in known space. As the leader of a joint research team with diplomatic immunity, I would have resources and authority that no exile could ever dream of. But we'd be giving up the technology, Sarah protested. Once it's in a joint facility, we lose any leverage we might have had. Sarah, my love, we never really had leverage, Lyra Lee said gently. A single mining station against 6 warships. Our only power was in convincing them that cooperation was more valuable than conquest. And we've succeeded beyond our wildest hopes. Sarah studied the star charts, seeing the dozens of worlds that could benefit from Lyra Lee's terraforming technology. What about us? Our marriage, our life together? If you're running a joint research facility, will we even have time for each other? Lyra Lee moved to stand behind Sarah's chair, wrapping her arms around her wife's shoulders. The terms say I can live and work wherever I choose. That includes living with my wife on whatever world we decide to call home. The research facility will be my workplace, not my prison. And what about children? Sarah asked, voicing a question that had been haunting her since their wedding. Can humans and Zephyrians even have children together? Lyra Lee's embrace tightened. I don't know, she admitted, but I know someone who could find out. A brilliant terraforming engineer with access to the best research facilities in the galaxy and a personal interest in genetic compatibility. Sarah laughed despite her worries. You want to terraform planets and solve interspecies reproduction in your spare time? I want to build a future where love isn't limited by species or biology, Lyra Lee replied. Where children like ours could grow up in a galaxy where human and Zephyrian cooperation is normal, not revolutionary. The dream was so beautiful that Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. You really think we can make this work? All of it? I think that 18 hours ago we were facing execution or imprisonment, and now we're being offered the chance to change galactic civilization, Lyra Lee said. If we can accomplish that, I have faith that we can handle whatever personal challenges await us. Sarah stood and turned to face her wife, seeing the hope and determination that had first drawn her to this remarkable woman. All right, let's do it. Let's accept their terms and see how much of the galaxy we can terraform together. Together, Lyra Lee agreed, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted like starlight and possibility. When they contacted Admiral Korath to accept the Imperial Council's terms, Sarah felt a strange mixture of endings and beginnings. Their time alone on the mining station was coming to an end, but their real adventure was just starting. Admiral, Sarah said formally, we accept the Empire's terms. Lyra Lee will take control of the joint research facility, and the terraforming technology will be shared between our species under her supervision. Excellent, Admiral Korath replied. The facility is already under construction in the Rigel 7 system, chosen for its position exactly halfway between human and Zephyrian space. Transportation will be provided for you both, along with any personal belongings you wish to bring. What about the mining station? Sarah asked. It's been my home for 3 years. The station will be maintained as a monument to the first successful human-Zephyrian diplomatic marriage, the Admiral said, with what might have been the ghost of a smile. I'm told that the Imperial Council believes such symbols are important for public relations. After the transmission ended, Sarah and Lyra Lee began the bittersweet task of packing their belongings and preparing to leave the place where they had found each other. The station had been Sarah's refuge from the galaxy's complexities, but now it was time to rejoin that galaxy and help shape its future. As they sealed the last of their personal items into transport containers, Sarah looked around the command center one final time, Any regrets? She asked Lyrily. 6 months later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of Research Station Harmony, watching as the first joint human-Zephyrian terraforming mission achieved its most spectacular success yet. The dead world of Kepler 442c stretched below them, but it was no longer the barren rock that surveys had catalogued 3 years earlier. Green continents sprawled across its surface. Vast oceans reflected the light of its twin suns, and white clouds swirled in atmospheric patterns that spoke of a living, breathing world. Atmospheric composition is perfect, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human xenobiologist who had become one of Lyrily's closest collaborators. Oxygen levels at 21%, nitrogen at 78%, with trace gases exactly matching the target parameters. Surface temperature averaging 18 degrees Celsius across the habitable zones. Biological integration is proceeding ahead of schedule, added Dr. Keck 7823, a Zephyrian geneticist whose silver skin bore the intricate tattoos that marked her as a master of her craft. The engineered organisms have established stable ecosystems across 43% of the planetary surface. Plant biomass is expanding at a rate of 12% per day. Sarah felt a surge of pride as she watched her wife coordinate the operation from the station's command center. In the 6 months since they had established Research Station Harmony, Lyrily had transformed from an exiled scientist into the most respected terraforming expert in known space. Her team of 30 researchers, evenly split between humans and Zephyrians, treated her with a reverence that bordered on worship, and they had good reason to. Under Lyrily's leadership, the joint research program had successfully terraformed 4 previously uninhabitable worlds, with 3 more transformations currently in progress. The technology that had once been a dangerous prototype was now a refined system capable of creating garden worlds in a matter of months. But for Sarah, the most remarkable transformation had been in Lyrily herself. The fearful, isolated woman she had married had blossomed into a confident leader who commanded respect from both species. The exile's uncertainty had been replaced by the assurance of someone who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to demand recognition for her achievements. Sarah, "You need to see this," Lyrily called from her workstation, her voice carrying the excitement that always accompanied a new discovery. Sarah made her way through the bustling command center, nodding to the various scientists who had become their extended family over the past months. The research station had developed its own culture, a unique blend of human and Zephyrian traditions that created something entirely new. "What have you found?" Sarah asked, settling into the chair beside Lyrily's workstation. "Something unexpected in the biological samples from Kepler 442c, Lyrily replied, activating a holographic display that showed microscopic organisms unlike anything Sarah had seen before. The terraforming organisms have begun to evolve, adapting to the local environment in ways that shouldn't be possible in such a short time frame. Sarah studied the images, seeing structures that seemed to shift and change even as she watched. "Is that a problem? Are they becoming dangerous?" "Just the opposite," Lyrily said, her violet eyes shining with wonder. "They're becoming more efficient. The evolutionary pressure is pushing them toward greater harmony with the planetary ecosystem. It's as if the planet itself is teaching them how to be better terraformers." Dr. Vasquez joined them at the workstation, her expression equally amazed. "Lyrily's right. The mutation rate is unprecedented, but it's all directed toward beneficial adaptations, faster reproduction, better environmental integration, more efficient atmospheric processing. It's like watching millions of years of evolution compressed into months." "More than that," Dr. Keck 7823 added, her clicking accent giving her words an almost musical quality. "The organisms are developing novel genetic structures that don't exist in either the original Zephyrian designs or the human modifications. They're creating entirely new biological solutions." Sarah felt a chill of excitement and fear. "What does this mean for future terraforming operations?" "It means," Lyrily said slowly, "that we may have created something far more powerful than we intended. These evolved organisms could potentially terraform worlds that were previously considered impossible targets. Planets with extreme radiation, unusual atmospheric compositions, even worlds with active geological instability. It also means," Dr. Vasquez added more cautiously, "that we need to completely revise our safety protocols. If the organisms can evolve this rapidly, we need to understand what other changes might be possible." Before anyone could respond, the station's communication system activated with an incoming transmission from Earth. Admiral Torres appeared on the main screen, her expression serious but not alarmed. Commander Chen, Dr. Lyra Chen, Admiral Torres began, using the combined name that Lyra Lee had adopted after their marriage. I'm contacting you regarding some interesting developments in both human and Zephyrian space. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. 6 months of successful collaboration had made her forget how precarious their situation still was. What kind of developments, Admiral? The good kind for once, Admiral Torres replied with a smile. The Colonial Senate has voted to establish the Terraforming Corps as a permanent branch of the Colonial Defense Force, with Dr. Lyra Chen designated as the founding director. Congratulations, Doctor. You're now officially the highest-ranking terraforming expert in human space. Lyra Lee's jaw dropped in obvious shock. Admiral, I'm honored, but I'm not even a human citizen. Actually, you are, Admiral Torres said. Your marriage to Commander Chen and your service to human colonies automatically qualifies you for citizenship under the Colonial Immigration Act. The paperwork went through this morning. Sarah grabbed Lyra Lee's hand, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were hearing. Her wife was no longer an exile or refugee. She was a human citizen with official rank and authority. There's more, Admiral Torres continued. I've also received word from the Zephyrian Imperial Council. They've officially overturned your exile decree. Dr. Lyra Chen, you've been granted full restoration of Imperial citizenship and awarded the Order of Scientific Merit, their highest civilian honor. Both citizenships? Sarah asked, trying to process the implications. She's a citizen of both governments? Dual citizenship is rare but not unprecedented, Admiral Torres explained. In Dr. Lyra Chen's case, both governments agreed that her unique position as director of the Joint Research Program makes dual citizenship not just appropriate, but necessary. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, staring at the communication screen as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Admiral, 6 months ago I was a genetic exile with no rights under any government's laws. Now you're telling me that I'm a citizen of both the human and Zephyrian governments? More than that, Admiral Torres said. You're being offered the position of Interspecies Scientific Coordinator, a new diplomatic rank that would give you authority to negotiate research agreements between any allied species. Essentially, you would become the galaxy's first official interspecies scientist diplomat. Sarah felt dizzy with the rapid pace of changes. What would that mean for our work here at Research Station Harmony? The research station would become the headquarters of the new Interspecies Scientific Coordination Office, Admiral Torres explained. Your current research would continue, but you'd also be responsible for establishing similar programs with other species we encounter. The Altarians have already expressed interest in terraforming partnerships, and the Centauri Confederation has requested consultations about atmospheric engineering. You're asking us to become the hub of interspecies scientific cooperation, Sarah said, the magnitude of the opportunity beginning to sink in. We're asking Dr. Lyra Chen to lead it, Admiral Torres corrected. You, Commander Chen, are being offered the position of Chief of Security for the Coordination Office. Someone needs to protect the galaxy's most valuable scientist, after all. Lyra turned to Sarah, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Sarah, what do you think? Are we ready for this kind of responsibility? Sarah looked around the command center, seeing the human and Zephyrian scientists working together with an efficiency and camaraderie that would have been impossible just a year ago. She thought about the 4 worlds they had already transformed and the millions of people who would eventually call those worlds home. She thought about the evolutionary breakthrough they had just discovered and the countless worlds that could benefit from it. I think, Sarah said slowly, that we've already proven we can handle more responsibility than anyone thought possible. The question is whether we want to take on even more. The offer comes with certain benefits, Admiral Torres added with a smile. Full diplomatic immunity for both of you, unlimited research funding, and your choice of posting locations. You could establish branch offices anywhere in human or Zephyrian space. Or, Dr. Vasquez interjected, you could stay right here and let the galaxy come to you. Research Station Harmony is already becoming legendary in scientific circles. Every xenobiologist in known space wants to work here. 5 years after their first terraforming success, Sarah stood in the delivery room of the New Geneva Medical Center on Harmony Prime. holding her newborn daughter while marveling at the miracle of interspecies genetics that had made her existence possible. Little Elena Kex Chen was perfect in every way that mattered. She had her mother's golden skin tone, though lighter than Lyrelai's, and her father's brown eyes shot through with flecks of violet that seemed to shift in the light. Her tiny fingers bore the subtle elongation that marked Zephyrian heritage, but her facial structure was distinctly human. She was, in every sense, a child of two worlds. "She's beautiful," Lyrelai whispered from the hospital bed, her voice hoarse from exhaustion but glowing with joy. "Sarah, look at what we've created." "I'm looking," Sarah replied, unable to take her eyes off their daughter. "And I'm still not sure I believe it's possible." Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had served as their obstetrician as well as continuing her work in xenobiology, smiled as she updated Elena Kex's medical records. The genetic compatibility turned out to be much simpler than we expected. Human and Zephyrian DNA are remarkably similar in structure, differing mainly in expression patterns rather than fundamental coding. "Simple for you to say," Lyrelai laughed weakly. "You didn't spend 2 years developing the genetic therapy that made conception possible." The breakthrough in interspecies reproduction had been one of many scientific advances that had emerged from Research Station Harmony over the past 5 years. What had started as a terraforming research facility had evolved into the galaxy's premier center for interspecies cooperation and scientific advancement. Under Lyrelai's leadership as interspecies scientific coordinator, the research station had expanded to include facilities for 17 different species. The Altarians had contributed their expertise in atmospheric engineering. The Centauri Confederation had shared their knowledge of stellar mechanics. And even the mysterious Voidwalkers had established a small research outpost to study dark matter applications. The terraforming program itself had transformed 43 worlds, with successful collaborations expanding far beyond the original human-Zephyrian partnership. Worlds that had been considered permanently uninhabitable were now thriving colonies supporting millions of beings from dozens of species. But for Sarah, the greatest achievement wasn't measured in worlds transformed or technologies developed. It was measured in the tiny life she held in her arms, proof that love could literally create new possibilities in the universe. "Commander Chen," came a familiar voice from the doorway. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Sarah looked up to see Admiral Torres entering the room, followed by an unexpected companion. Admiral Korath, the Zephyrian military officer who had once threatened to destroy their mining station. In the 5 years since their first confrontation, he had become one of their strongest supporters, and had even served as Lyrelai's witness during her citizenship ceremonies. Admiral Torres. "Admiral Korath," Sarah said, carefully adjusting her hold on Elena Kex. "Thank you for coming." "We wouldn't miss this," Admiral Torres replied, her usually stern expression softening as she gazed at the baby. "The first interspecies child born in known space? This is a historic moment." Admiral Korath approached more cautiously, his alien features unreadable. "Dr. Lyrelai Chen, Commander Chen, I bring greetings from the Imperial Council. They have asked me to present this gift to your daughter." He produced a small crystalline pendant that seemed to contain swirling galaxies of light. "This is a life crystal from the Imperial Treasury, traditionally given to children who are expected to achieve great things. It will grow with her, changing color and pattern as she develops her own unique abilities." Lyrelai accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. "Admiral, this is too precious. These crystals are reserved for Imperial heirs." "As far as the Empire is concerned," Admiral Korath replied formally, "your daughter is Imperial heir to the future of interspecies cooperation. Her very existence proves that the barriers between our peoples can be overcome." Before anyone could respond, the room's communication system activated with an incoming transmission. The holographic display showed the familiar interior of Research Station Harmony's command center, where Dr. Kex 7823 was coordinating what appeared to be a celebration. "Dr. Lyrelai Chen, Commander Chen," Dr. Kex 7823's voice carried clearly across the space between worlds. "The entire research staff sends congratulations on the birth of Elena Kex. We have prepared a special gift for her first glimpse of the galaxy." The holographic display shifted to show an external view of Harmony Prime, the terraformed world that had become their home. But something was different about the planet's appearance. Across the largest continent, the forests and cities had been arranged to spell out a message visible from orbit. Welcome, Elena Kex-Chen. 40 million people worked together to create this greeting, Dr. Kex-7823 explained. Humans, Zephyrians, Altarians, Centauri, and 12 other species. They planted trees, built structures, and even redirected rivers to create letters that will remain visible for centuries. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what their colleagues had accomplished. You reshaped a continent to welcome our daughter? We reshaped the galaxy to welcome your family, Dr. Kex-7823 corrected. Elena Kex represents hope for every species that has ever wondered whether true cooperation is possible. Her birth proves that differences can become strengths when approached with love instead of fear. As the transmission continued, showing scenes of celebration from dozens of worlds where their terraforming projects had created new homes for countless beings, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. 5 years ago, she had been a lonely mining station commander, facing the end of human presence in this system. Lyreley had been an exiled scientist with no hope of freedom or recognition. Neither of them could have imagined that their desperate gamble would lead to galactic transformation. What are you thinking about? Lyreley asked softly, noticing Sarah's distant expression. I'm thinking about the future, Sarah replied, adjusting Elena Kex in her arms. About what kind of galaxy our daughter will grow up in. A better one than either of us knew, Admiral Torres said with conviction. The Interspecies Scientific Coordination Office has prevented 3 potential wars through diplomatic cooperation. The terraforming program has created homes for over 200 million displaced refugees, and the genetic research that made Elena Kex possible has opened pathways for dozens of other previously incompatible species to form families together. More than that, Admiral Korath added, the success of your partnership has inspired similar collaborations throughout known space. The Andromedans have established joint research facilities with the Helix Confederation. The Vega colonies are sharing terraforming technology with previously hostile neighbors. Your love story has become a template for interspecies cooperation. Sarah looked down at her daughter, seeing the future of the galaxy reflected in those violet-flecked brown eyes. Elena Kex would grow up in a universe where cooperation was normal, where species differences were celebrated rather than feared, where love could overcome any barrier. Do you think she'll want to follow in our footsteps? Sarah asked. Become a scientist or diplomat like her mother's? Lyreley smiled, reaching out to stroke their daughter's tiny hand. I think she'll create her own path just like we did. Maybe she'll become an artist who paints with starlight, or an explorer who discovers new forms of life we haven't even imagined yet. Or maybe, Dr. Vasquez suggested with a grin, she'll become a troublemaker who falls in love with someone completely impossible and forces the galaxy to adapt to accommodate their relationship. Gods help us all if that happens, Sarah laughed. One galaxy-changing romance per family should be enough. Elena Kex chose that moment to open her eyes for the first time, gazing up at her mother's with an expression that seemed far too wise for a newborn. For just an instant, Sarah could have sworn she saw starlight swirling in those tiny violet flecks. Hello, little one, Lyreley whispered. Welcome to your universe. We've been preparing it for you. As if responding to her mother's voice, Elena Kex made a soft sound that could have been anything from a sigh to a laugh. But to Sarah, it sounded like the first word in a new language that would bridge every gap between the stars. What do you think her first word will be? Admiral Torres asked, clearly enchanted by the baby's alert expression. Probably something that doesn't exist in any known language, Sarah replied. Something that means love and discovery and hope all at the same time. The perfect word for the daughter of the galaxy's most impossible couple, Lyreley agreed. Outside the medical center's windows, Harmony Prime's twin suns were setting over a world that bore the fingerprints of 17 different species, working in harmony. The cities below glowed with bioluminescent architecture contributed by the Altarians, while transportation networks designed by Centauri engineers moved beings of all shapes and sizes through corridors lined with earth flowers and Zephyrian crystal gardens.